Matteo is a writer, a curator, and an academic researcher. He wrote the book Animal Spirits, a bestiary of the commons, and it was published in 2008. And he lectures frequently at the intersection of Italian operaismo, French philosophy, media theory, and life sciences. His texts have been translated into many languages, and he has contributed to a lot of journals and newspapers. I just mention a few of them. Liberation, Der Freitag for German people among you, and many others. Together with Wietske Maas, he wrote the Manifesto of Urban Cannibalism, which I haven't read, but I'm curious to learn more about it. And right now, I think it's for this year, you're preparing an exhibition at NGBK in Berlin with a very interesting title, The Ultimate Capital is the Sun. I think it could be also interesting for this context. And I still remember one from a text you published 10 years ago, actually. There's one quotation which really stuck to my mind, and I just checked the English version again. And the quotation goes like this: in post-Fordism, the factory has come out of the factory, and the whole of society has become a factory. And that's quite interesting, turning back to post-industrial society. It's not that the factory has vanished, but in fact the factory has become completely ubiquitous, I would say. He's going to talk about, and the title of his talk is The Number of the Collective Beast, the Substance of Value in the Age of the New Machinic Institutions of Ranking. Welcome, Matteo.
Thanks, Inke, for the introduction. And maybe, we go back to this issue of the social factory at the end of the presentation in the question time. My talk today is divided in two parts, and I prepare a very basic slideshow composed only of two pictures. So, I believe this will be a good way to retain some memories from this talk. In the first part, I will try to provide some sketches about the problem of the definition of value, a bit of theory, nothing too complicated for the morning. Just to show that any economic indicator is somehow a historical construction, sometimes a simulation, and always a political projection. In the second part, on the other hand, I will discuss 4 empirical models that are central today in the measurement of value. So, no worries, if we move maybe in the second part to more practical things. In the presentation of the abstract that I sent to Inke, I wrote, how to measure value. Any form of cultural, artistic, academic, material production is today immersed into the same machinic sphere of valorization, namely into a network. My talk focuses and frames only this partial perspective. It does not discuss networks as medium of production, exchange, communication, organization, or even money minting, as a lot of other people will do in this festival, but as medium of collective valorization, that is, of collective value generation, amplification, and accumulation. The network form appears to be the most empirical model available today to describe such a process of social valorization, and more importantly, its measurement. In other words, I introduced the network as the contemporary form of value. But it happened that a new generation of institutions and techniques entered the stage of history to measure the value of these networks. These networks works by accumulation like a vortex. So it's not just an horizontal form. And I will discuss 4 cases. The obsessive reference economy of the university, the pervasive link economy of Google's PageRank algorithm, the geopolitical influence of international rating agencies, and also the mundane hierarchies of the art world. They all function according to a collective, network-based and vortical generation of value. A political critique of this machinic institution of rating and ranking that are collectively and socially generating what I call the new number of the beast, the measure of value, I argue is still missing. So why to attempt this investigation of the collective dimension of value production? My hypothesis is that the notorious and biblical number of the beast, usually identifying money with the devil, is indeed a collective one. The beast is collective, is us, and the number is about us. It is the measure of our production before turning into money. This investigation has for me direct political implication. It can be useful, for instance, to sound and understand if the proposal of basic income is grounded on a real fact, that is, transformation of the traditional economy based on industrial production into an economy more related to social production. So where do we start? I start from Marx as an example of somebody that had, already at his time, an ambivalent notion of value that is indeed bicephalous with two heads. And this is the background picture is coming from a church in Italy. I don't disclose the origin, but probably you start already to understand the meaning of this picture. I will explain maybe later, but I guess it's very clear, no? You get an idea what it emerged from the background of this collective portrait. So, in his book, More Heat Than Light, Mirovsky shows how Marx drew from two models common to the science of his time to describe the arcane of the genesis of value. That is, from the new field of thermodynamics on one side and Newtonian physics on the other. So in Marx, we have a measure of value based on the number of hours spent at work and a measure of value based on social relations, a thermodynamic measure and a gravitational measure, a measure inspired by Carnot and a measure inspired by Newton, a metric one and a topological one based on horsepower and the other on the field of forces, one based on working time and the other on socially necessary labor, a substantial one and a relational one. Clearly, none of these two models fit perfectly the flesh of living labor today. This issue is still debated, and we are still struggling within it like in a straitjacket. How to measure economic value, in particular labor surplus value? There is no easy consensus about how to answer this question, as you said. The relational model of value seems to fit better social and cultural production. The substantial model of value was fitting and still fits better industrial production. Interestingly, the innovative rupture represented also by the Foucauldian biopolitics was, according to Deleuze, about the introduction of a vision of power as a field of forces, as an abstract social machine coming to replace the old model of the economy based on the industrial thermodynamic machine. In an interview with Negri, Deleuze in the 1990, once noticed how a model of machine is at the same time a model of society. Each kind of society corresponds to a particular kind of machine, Deleuze said, with simple mechanical machines corresponding to sovereign societies, thermodynamic machines to disciplinary societies, cybernetic machines and computers to control societies. End of the quote. So, addressing both the fields of media theory and political economy, one of my basic questions is, which model of machine do we unconsciously apply to our view of society and our understanding of value today? We may say that the machine that is a model of value is the network, is the cybernetic machine that Deleuze was referring to. But this answer must be properly explained and expanded. The problem of the substance of value is also philosophically and politically the problem of its measure. We could say that mathematics and economics exist precisely because there is always something that escapes measurability. Political economy is but the attempt to domesticate excess, to come to terms with surplus and capture it. Capitalism has been trying to control the substance of living labor by applying, in different ages, different devices of measurement. These measuring machines are the machine of Deleuze, that Deleuze and Guattari, these are machines that from the corpus of the work of Deleuze and Guattari we always forget to mention, because we're always referring to this desiring and production machine, producing machine, while Deleuze and Guattari, when all the time they mention the productive machine, they also mention the registering machine, the machine of the second synthesis. So it's important to understand how it precisely also in their philosophy, all the time there is a production, there is also a kind of measurement of that production produced by specific machine that have to inscribe codes, number to extract and measure a surplus value. However, why do we need to measure value at any cost? Marx himself is said to belong to a very Western and Aristotelian tradition of the measurability of the being for his attempt to mathematically calculate value. There are schools of thought, however, like autonomist Marxists more recently, that do not believe in Marx's idea of an objective description of capitalism, and then of an objective crisis of capitalism. But they address a subjective crisis of capital, an external intervention and ruptures. Autonomist Marxism, for instance, has been always underlying the autonomy of labor against the autonomy of capital. And so, according to this vision, it was the excess of the social body, the measure of living labor, that set the Industrial Revolution out of joint, that generated the international workers' movement, and that pushed so the evolution of capitalism towards post-Fordism, the information revolution and finance capitalism. So, what capitalism, in my opinion, attempts to measure, monitor, and capture is precisely a surplus that is a collective power of value generation that comes before capital itself. And what we should underline is that there is never individual production of value. Value is in itself always collective notion, a collective relation, a collective measure. So let's make an intermezzo now just to clarify maybe other positions that will be discussed these days here. And we could today simplify the whole debate in a very, as I said, simplified way, according to 5 schools of thought that I divided here, like in a joke, in Puritans, clock watchers, autonomists, swingers, and accelerationists. First, we have the Puritans, those who do not study economy and specifically Marxian economic concept for the fear to commit the sin of economicism, like Badiou, or those who recognize economic disciplines as a mere reincarnation of the old Christian theology from whose damnation no escape seems possible, like Agamben. Second, we have the clock watchers, that are the loyal comrades to the supposed inherent rationality of economy, which calculate labor watch in hand and only within the factory walls. And in this way also they calculate also right and wage for the workers. That means orthodox Marxists. Third, we have the autonomists that recognize the excess of living labor beyond any measurement of economic rationality. The entire metropolis is a productive space as a social factory, and the self-determination of subjectivities before any codified right. It is autonomous Marxism in general. Fourth, we have the swingers, that are those who, today more than ever, support a monetarist turn in political economy, the hegemony of the circulation of money over production, and the idea of controlling economy via the invention of new currencies, for instance. And then finally, we find the accelerationists that envision the end of capitalism, hijacking its inner tendencies into new visionary common infrastructure and radical basic income. See the recent manifesto for an accelerationist politics and the new generation of thinkers that is like somehow growing around the scene of speculative realism. This, of course, is just illustrative simplification, but for me it's important to maybe illustrate how we lack today a Gesamt theory, like an all-encompassing theory to describe economy. And each of us has a specific position preferred precisely to embrace the determinate perspective. So let's go back to what I was saying before about the problem of the definition of value, its surplus, its measure, and its collective nature. This scheme affects also any definition of collective goods today, and specifically the debate on the commons or the debate on the common without the S. For instance, as presented in Commonwealth by Hart and Negri, the notion of the common is originated within the crisis of Marx's measure of value. This is the crisis of time as unit of measure of labor. Private time and labor time can no longer be distinguished from each other. The metropolis can no longer be distinguished from the factory. The production of the social factory, the metropolis, and expanded productive space is said to be out of measure. And time, they say, can no longer be the unit of measure of such a production. Then Art and Negri go back to the Marxian idea of capital as an accumulation of social relations. And they call the common such a production of social relation that is subsequently captured by capital. In his early manuscripts, the young Marx introduced a similar idea, the Gattungswesen, the human as a species being. The species being is the main feature of the human, according to Marx, for its social nature, for its nature of political animal. Similarly, maybe, the idea of the common attempts to show this collective beast at the center of contemporary capitalism, under the form of a species being, but a species being, of course, that has to be constructed, not already given. So, specific apparatuses of measure, I argue, specific apparatuses of control and capture are necessary to domesticate such a beast today. So, evoke this social monster, we have to understand how capital is able to capture such a net of relation, such a field of forces, how it's able to impose today a number to the collective beast. Sorry, I have probably another slide here somewhere. No, sorry. Yeah, something less visionary. So, new empirical models of valorization must be introduced to understand this metamorphosis of capital of labor of the last decades. So, following intuition by a lot of other authors across contemporary philosophy and political economy, from Foucault to Deleuze and Guattari to Art and Negri, and switching a bit of our perspective, I propose to describe the field of economic forces in a topological way, and not in a quantitative way, like orthodox political economy has been used to do. So the institution of rating and ranking that I try to describe soon are apparatuses to use to measure the field of value, but of course also to control and capture the field of social relation that produce this very value. I propose here for examples, the reference economy of the university, the attention economy of the internet, the prestige economy of the art world, and the geopolitical influence of international rating agencies. They all function as networks of valorization, as multi-armed giant octopuses immersed in the waters of different oceans. For reason of clarity, I suggest to distinguish between ranking, that is a machinic and objective form of measure, and rating. This is a political and subjective form. But actually, all these models can be considered different incarnations of the same machinic diagram, and I do this distinction just for the sake of clarity. So let's try to describe a distinction between machinic ranking and political rating. By ranking, I mean a position in a certain range according to an objective procedure, a method, an algorithm, as it happens in the evaluation of academic journals, in the results of Google search engine, or in the calculation of the number of followers on Facebook and Twitter. This is very easy to understand. I think how much you're important as a person or as a company according to the number of followers you have on Twitter, or friends on Facebook, or links to your website. On the other hand, by rating, I mean the position along a scale according to a system of subjective assessments based on recognition, trust, and support by person with whom a complex network of relation has been established. See the art world, where you don't have a number, but your value is generated by an informal and continuous labor of personal relations. But see specifically the international rating agencies, which offer the assessment to investors within a fabric of pure political relation and gigantic conflicts of interest. So I define the first diagram as machinic because it implies the use of codified procedures, and the second diagram as political because it implies the ancient political art of building consensus, trust, and social alliances on the basis of informal relations. But actually, both, as I said, are probably similar, the same incarnation of the same machinic system. But what's interesting for me is also to underline how this, for example, this is the scheme of Google PageRank algorithm. This algorithm, this very machinic procedure, they always install themselves on previous informal set of relation. Like, for example, at the time of industrialism, we had the industrial machine was like replacing a kind of abstract relation, a division of labor that was invisible outside the factory. So it's interesting how machine always come to replace a normal connection, division of labor. And today, algorithms, they do the same. They install on previous social relation that maybe they are invisible in the sense that they are not clarifying in any specific map or cartography, but then they're immediately become visible through this apparatus and through this algorithm. But also what is important for me is like also to make a distinction between social networks and institutional apparatuses. It's precisely what we have in the art world. We can consider the art world as a sort of social network as much as the internet, because there are none too much codified role, while, for example, rating agency, the international rating agency or the university, they are super institutional. But both, in my opinion, also this very monolithic form of institution, we can and we have to consider them a sort of condensation of social relation. So I described the first example. That is the reference economy of university as an example of something that is institutional and machinic at the same time in terms of ranking technique. And it was the German university, actually, at the end of the 19th century that introduced a ranking system for academic publication for the first time. And this, you are very familiar, the academic ranking system is based by tracing and calculating the number and the matrix of bibliographical citation between books, articles, and so on. So more citation to an article or a book, the greater the academic importance of its author. As it well known, every university researcher today is still captured in this measuring apparatus that determines his career and his gradient of competition. So it's not enough to publish a book. You have to show that you have accumulated citation and references, and you are very well followed by your colleague. This ranking system, however, crosses and shapes university also on a global scale. Like a professor or an academic book, universities fall into a global ranking system. The top 10 of the best and even the worst university of the world is constantly updated, measuring different features that we cannot discuss here, like the performance of their research, the number of books that have been published, how many patents have been registered, and so on. These indexes measure their prestige and their global value as a university. But as you know, especially reading the recent Anglo-American chronicles, such a network of valorization has a deep impact on the social status of a given university, on the tuition fees, and thereafter directly on student debt. So we can say that we could define student debt as the reversal of this cognitive pyramid of university ranking, reproducing its segmentation and economic hierarchies like in a mirror. And this is, the example of the university. Then the second example I bring is like the attention economy of the internet as something that has this social dimension, but at the same time a machinic technique. And the algorithm of the search engine Google was, was born, by the way, applying the old German model used to measure academic publication. This is like the diagram, let's say, of Google PageRank algorithm. And I guess today you're very familiar with this. Maybe 10 years ago, when it was introduced, not many people understood how this algorithm was working. And basically, Google PageRank algorithm automatically calculates the value of each web link, we can take of each web page, and calculate the value of each web link and decides the importance and visibility of a given document depending on the number and the quality of link pointing to it. This is, I guess, something very easy to understand today. Simply a web page or like your position as a kind of Facebook entity or like a Twitter entity, depends how many, by the number of followers you have, by the number of friends, by the number of likes and the number of links. So this Google PageRank algorithm was the first clear algorithm that describes how value is calculated and accumulated in cognitive capitalism, because it's quite specific and clear mathematical device to measure the value and importance of a point, of an entity on the network, according precisely to how much attention is concentrated, how much web traffic, and so on. And for me, still, this is the best, the most empirical model we have to describe today's cognitive economy. Another example, the prestige economy of the art world is something that is informal and based on these social and political skills. At the closer inspection, the attention economy that the internet has made visible more recently has been always part of the spectacular economy of mass media, and specifically of the art world. The work of art functions today as a unique, irreproducible signifier whose value is accumulated and measured within a complex social matrix. In this network of valorization surrounding the artwork, very codified roles are connected to each other. It could be still this diagram: authors, curators, critics, galleries, collectors, exhibition, magazines, museum, and eventually the audience. It is not enough to browse, it's enough actually to browse the main art journals to see how contemporary art is carefully socially engineered, and more concerned about the delicate hierarchy of name dropping than aesthetic issues. But compared to the impassive algorithms of digital networks and the rigid university indexes, the art world, like all the spectacular world of commodities, is organized around vortices of valorization that appear much more fluid and informal. Then the fourth example, that is the trust economy of rating agencies on the international scale, as an example of something that is institutional and based, however, on totally kind of political subjective decision and procedures. At the geopolitical level, the rating agencies show mechanisms very similar to those that I tried to explain at different scales, at other scales. From the recent chronicles of the global crisis, we see that the fate of public debt, by the way, is in the hands of private rating agencies. They work like the arm wing of giant financial interests that in this way influence the destiny of entire countries. We could say that the political and institutional apparatuses engineered by this organization represent most clearly the machinic substrate of the economy of debt, since the degree of speculation on debt depends on the amount of trust this is numerically assigned to a given company or country. Moreover, it is the media amplification of rating announcements from these agencies, this incredible political and mediatic tension that is associated to simple codes like AA, AAA, A+, and so on. And this related mass hysteria that makes these agencies machine of political and biopolitical governance. These agencies are clearly private actors, but their influence plays across the public sphere of language and performative acts. And funny enough, when they are into legal troubles and sued by some governments, they protect their rating decision, at least in the US, with the First Amendment of the US Constitution, as freedom of speech. So, I think that this rating and ranking mechanism replaced the traditional discipline of time of the fortest industrial metropolis as a new form of biopolitical control and production of new subjectivity and social competition. So this is somehow a way, when you have a metropolis, a kind of new form of production extended to the metropolis, and time is no longer the discipline you can apply to worker, this kind of fluid, invisible hierarchies become a way to, however, instill competition and control production in, according to this new regime. But I don't mean to introduce an opposition between the temporal field of Fordism and the social field of post-Fordism, because I believe these two regimes are still somehow integrated into each other. So, as the machines described by Marx, actually, in the chapter of Capital, these measuring systems do not invent anything new, but they occupy and map a network of pre-existing social relations and behaviors. The economies of social production clearly exist well before the rating and ranking systems come to overcode, measure, control, and capture them. We could say that also the machine of debt today comes to overcode these relations. Debt can be considered a specular negative image of these networks of valorization. Then today, a lot of people debate and discuss if debt appeared before money or vice versa. But I'm personally a bit skeptical to reduce the economy of debt to a sort of original form, ur-form of economy. I guess later today, Lazzarato will depict a scenario where credit and debt and financialization have colonized our lives. The models of ranking and rating that I try to introduce are the same ones that describe, in a reverse fashion, the networks of debt of financial capitalism and keep alive the apparatuses of subjectification and competition of neoliberalism. We could say that the degree of trust, measured and projected by the rating agencies, for instance, run politically specular to that sense of guilt which is the basis of the debtor-creditor economic relationship. These new apparatuses of debt did not replace the apparatuses of cognitive capitalism, but is a very cognitive machinic capitalism to provide facilities and devices for the governance of debt and measure of value. So it is a cognitive and machinic capitalism, a new breed of measurement institution that allows debt and all the trick of financial capitalism to become pervasive and persistent, chasing us wherever we go. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. I would like to invite questions or statements. Michal.
I have a question which concerns your position, but something I think broader also that you represent. I mean, as I understand, you have this idea that the really the productive force lies outside of capitalism. That it is either parallel to it or precede. Either it is life or is it network, but it's not something that is yielded by capitalism. And this is precisely my question. Is it the axiom of the theory? Because in a way it's like physiocratism, or it's like primitive accumulation, because capitalism doesn't produce anymore, it captures value. And well, so this is the question. Yeah.
No, I mean, this is a super precise question because it's precisely the critical point. I don't have a position, but you understood clearly that I was trying probably to navigate on this ambivalent relation. Even in today's, let's say, schools of political economy, no? Even within the big Marxist family, no? What comes first? No, I mean, the potentiality of labor or capital as an autonomous agent. And I don't know if I have a clear solution for this thing. I guess you understand what I'm saying, in the sense that, of course, we have to recognize an incredible autonomy to capital, no? But at the same time, if we recognize an extreme autonomy to capitalism, to capital, to economy, we fall in an incredible fatalism, no? There is no other option because capital is what has produced everything, has produced working class, has invented money, is controlling all the apparatuses today. So it's something stronger than us somehow. But and my feeling is like still critical theory today is struggling along this dimension. I mean, like, you know, on one side, potentiality of I don't know, not of nature, but let's say of labor. And on the other side, the potentiality. And even today, for example, when the recent school and the last debates of media theory discuss algorithm, no, there is still it's something very similar, because when you have this incredible debate on the new governance of the algorithm, a lot of people recognize to the algorithm like a completely autonomous intelligence, no, something that becomes even autonomous from the life of the society. While the point is to find the moment, the limit, the threshold of capture. I guess even Deleuze and Guattari, when they introduced the notion of the machinic, they were like trying to solve this problem. No, the Machinic is like, it's not the machine and it's not the human. It's something in between. It's something that is like, but if you maybe, I don't know if I was enough clear, but.
I understood you want to recognize the problem, you want to mediate, in a sense.
No, I recognize the problem, but I don't have, yeah. Also in my paper, I made probably some provocative statement, but just to provoke, some reaction. But as I said, I believe that today we lack a Gesamt theory. We don't have any big picture theory to solve all these issues.
I think there's a second statement from the audience. Can you say your name? We didn't get introduced, so.
Yeah, Andres Friedrichsmeyer. I very much like your talk, and as far as I understood it, the main point is this distinction of institutional rating and machinical ranking. And my question is about a possible connection to concepts by David Graeber in depth the last 5,000 years. One of your examples was the university system, and I once wrote a paper concerning on why did the university system had so little resilience, so little resistance against the economization. That is, that as far as I understood it, you connect to the ranking, to the machinical part, because they already had rating institutions in the university system before, and I thought about referring to the concepts of human economy versus a commercial economy by David Graeber, and the first of them, the human economy, I think kind of corresponds to the rating concept and the commercial economy to the ranking. I was interested to hear what your opinion to this resemblance, and because it might help to understand why sectors, non-economic sectors, had so little resistance against their economization with this concept by Graeber.
Yeah, no, I made this sketch of these 4 examples, just try to maybe to open a field of research and try to see how you have this new procedures, technique, institution of ranking and rating, but I perceive them as a kind of, machines of capture and measurement that today are becoming much more advanced. And I don't think that we can make the distinction, about a kind of human economy or a kind of commercial economy. And what I try to do is precisely how, any kind of production today, different level in different field, is measured. And so before I made this, also this sketch about schools of thought today, and I guess that Graeber could be associated to somebody that has been like investigating the debt as a Urform, because he made a book where he traces back history of debt, up to 10,000 years ago, things like that. As I repeat myself, I'm just making a very empirical proposal, and I don't have any kind of whole holistic theory to keep everything together. But I don't know if I replied to your question, but I don't think we can apply this idea of human economy, social economy to what I described in the case of university or education.
Thanks a lot. One of my questions would also have been, where do you position actually the Occupy movement in these 5 schools, which you which you outlined so very well, the clock watchers and so on, and the swingers and so on.
No, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a third statement.
I have a question regarding this value measurement mechanisms you talked about, because you referred to this fragment on machines from Grundrisse when Marx is talking about disposable time replacing labor time as a measure of value. However, Marx very clearly uses the future tense, and he's talking about a future situation when disposable time will replace labor time as a measurement of value. So my question is, to what extent can we apply this concept to to contemporary situation? Are we really beyond this labor as a measure of value situation?
I mean, time,
and if
as a measure of labor, you said?
Yeah, labor time, yes. Labor time and not disposable time as a measure of value. And because, of course, I'm aware of this idea of ontological communism, and I think it's quite interesting, though I have two doubts. One is it's extremely abstract, and I would like to know if you can identify any precise moments in the contemporary mode of production where this ontological communism is emerging.
What
because
do you mean
most
by ontological communism?
The communism is the future order growing in the shell of the old one, right? That it's developing right now in the world as we can see it, and not in the. It's not going to be. This is
I didn't mention that, no, in my talk.
Yeah, but this is one of the ways of developing this this idea of disposable time and the sort of future order being already present in the world where we live. We don't need the event, as Badiou says, right? It's already there. Most of the examples you gave are rather examples of a real subsumption.
True.
And not of any autonomy. So where is the autonomy?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. But I believe that today we have to be empirical and practical, no? And to understand how we are trapped into this. Now I understand your question. How we are trapped into this, form of production that are totally new. The autonomy, this is what I did is a quite, I would say, negative description of the potentiality, because these are machines of capture. The autonomy is like precisely, in my opinion, I don't know, in inventing something new to make analysis of this, of course, but we don't need to become paranoid, as I said before, mentioning some attitudes, but being more, say, productive. My idea is like this infrastructure must be studied also to imagine, to envision new infrastructure. So, I mean, the internet can be completely potentially could be completely be re-engineered, redesigned, and so the university, and so the autonomy is not just something utopian, something you have to engineer, in my opinion, working with the current infrastructure and working with it. And of course, what I did, my talk was not about, it was very modest, it was just to try to map a system of valorization. So I was not talking about financial capitalism, I was not talking about production, I was not making any sophisticated analysis of macroeconomics, circulation of debt, or the whole series of stock exchange crises we had following. And the autonomy is, I don't know, it's about, at this level, it's like working again on the infrastructure level, and actually to understand, where value is accumulated in which way. Anyway, it's a big question I have to reply to.
Hi, Armin Beverung. Thanks, Matteo,
Hi.
for the talk. I enjoyed that. I'm kind of wondering where you go with that, because you're giving us an analysis of different ways of kind of measuring value in these kinds of modes of ranking and rating. I wonder how they relate to the kinds of production that they try to kind of measure and valorize in a sense, because it seems to be that the four examples would be quite different. So I'm wondering if you can say a bit more about the relationship. I'm thinking, for example, in the university, it's a question of, it's a very strange thing, this journal ranking, which has a little bit to do with how then academic jobs are kind of spread out, and how you work, maybe how you get paid. But there's a whole different kind of institutional framework that kind of hooks onto it, right? And the rating doesn't get sold. Whereas in the Google case, for example, it's perhaps a bit different. Whereas Google does it in order to get us to use Google so it can sell as advertising, right? So it's a very different economy, and also kind of measure there plays a different role. Whereas I suspect that some of the other measures are actually sold, right? As hey, I can sell you a catalog with prices, and I can tell you how much something's worth. So the rating agencies make loads of money by rating, and I don't see so much of the social production, how it relates to some kind of social production, except that it engages in a really messy kind of organization and measure of interest rates and so on for states. So I'm wondering if you can say more about that relation.
You described it very well. You described it very well. Actually, you pointed to something I didn't have time to describe precisely. That if you take Google, it's like this incredible machine making measurement and then transforming into attention economy, like selling, but actually like using this algorithm to sell advertisement and so making money with simply online advertisement. This is the real economy of a giant like Google. In the case of university, you're right, they don't sell this measurement, but they produce political competition, let's say, within the institution and among the institution. And in the case of the international rating agency, I would say it's even more complicated because, of course, they sell they make analysis, they make market analysis, they can sell them. But for me, what's interesting is like the geopolitical influence and the connection with the media apparatuses and all the panic produced. So it's very complicated, and you're right, there are different ways also to analyze. I would say maybe we can reconduce this to basically to widespread form, network-based form of social production that is then transformed in different form of governance, political governance, institutional governance, geopolitical governance, media. But you are right in the way, these apparatuses, they can transform value and can be used in different ways. So it's new things to analyze.
Okay, we have time for one final question. If there's a great urgency in the audience, which I don't see. So I suggest that we thank you for this really great lecture, and we have a little applause. Thank you.